Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please move to your seats and help us start on time. As a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but keep them at the ready so that you can text or email your questions for our guest speakers to be addressed on the screen. askmetna@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We'll be starting in a moment.
I got this CIO looking right in my eyes. I'm nervous right now. That's all I'm going to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Brigadier General Paul Fredenberg, U.S. Army retired Executive Vice President for National Security and Defense, FCA International.
Yeah, that's all. That's what I'm talking about right there. We are going to keep this going today. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to meet with some of our industry partners down there on the floor. And we have a phenomenal panel here, and you can see for yourselves, this is going to be a great conversation. So it is my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of this morning's panel, Lieutenant General Ed Cardone, U.S. Army retired. He is the founding partner and co-CEO of Touchstone's Futures. General Cardone retired from the Army in 2019 after a 36-year career. In his final active duty role as a director of U.S. Army Office of Business Transformation, he helped to establish Army Futures Command, which is now responsible for modernizing our Army. Previously, he had led our Cyber Command through its transformation to a world-class cyber force as he led the rapid growth of both the offensive and defensive cyber mission teams. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome to General Ed Cardone and his panel today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks a lot, General Lawrence, for this opportunity, and thanks to each and every one of you for being here at this panel. We've talked a lot about the transport side, but transport is all about data. Data is all about decision making, and so we have the leaders of our Army here that are leading that part of what is going to allow us to have what some call decision advantage, and that's enabled by data. And so I'll ask questions and introduce as each one goes, but I want to start off with Dr. Markowitz, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer of our Army. And Dave, maybe as the Chief Data Analytics Officer, what are some of the specific data strategies or analytic initiatives the Army plans to drive decision-making across the Army at scale? Not like one solution, but across the Army.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. I believe Mr. Garcia introduced some of our major initiatives within the Army. We've got the Unified Network Plan and then the Army Data Plan. The Army Data Plan it's in third year of evolution. It started with, it's an Army-wide view to get Army data available for accelerating decision at echelon. Started off across all business mission areas, business, warfighting, enterprise IT, a little on Intel, that Intel had already been driving, to get a comprehensive view of what type of decisions, priority decisions need to be made, and what did we need to do to get Army data simplified, curated, available, and getting users actually making decisions and changing decision processes to get buy-in and to get cultural change. Very effective in the business mission area. The enterprise IT is really standing up, and our warfighting mission area is the most complicated and is now the area of focus in our third year. The third year, this focus this year is really at theater level decisions. Leveraging activities both in Europe in support of SAGU and in a directed effort with USERPAC to make a persistent COP. With the idea that if you get a theater level COP and data feeding that, you can help decision making both up at the enterprise and going below. It is challenged because you get decision making at speed when you have alignment between decision makers, staff, processes, and policy and process owners that aligns in different areas, and that is warfighting mission area. It's a little broken or split up between warfighters, the acquisition community, the development community, our Futures Command, they all have a play into it, and we're trying to synchronize that. That is our primary effort. It's supported by other activities with kind of directed data decision-making deployable teams to help them accelerate where they are. And there's direct guidance from our vice and under it, making sure those teams are aligned to Army priorities.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Markowitz. And I think it's really important to know that we're putting organizational structure against this,
Yes.
with these teams. So
Yes.
I think that's really powerful. So before I dive down a little bit deeper, I want to kind of come back up. And we're very fortunate today to have Brigadier General Joe Papenfuss, the Chief of Staff of DISA, and your boss was here yesterday talking to us about all the work going on in support. So maybe the discussion about data interoperability and integration at the joint level. Sure. And with our partners. So what are some of the challenges and solutions that DISA is bringing with an eye toward what does this mean for the Army?
No, I was going to say, if you go back to really the opening and all of the speakers throughout, General Morrison, General Stanton, my boss yesterday, General Skinner, okay, my speech is done. But I guess I can't do that. So as you look at it, DISA is a combat support agency that actually takes in warfighter requirements and then utilizes the acquisition capabilities it has to really deliver those capabilities to the warfighter at point of need or ahead of need. And so as you heard yesterday, and it was actually a great lead-in of, is Army driving towards interoperability, integration, and change? And that's true. Now the question is Army integrating and interoperable, and it would be great if it's completely integrated, but interoperable within the joint environment? And so as you look at it in a data environment, looking at really transport agnostic environment, how do you bring in those capabilities within the joint environment to deliver those capabilities to the COCOMs, COCOM agnostic? Because as we know, no one COCOM is going to really fight organically or unanimously, independently by themselves. So coming out of Europe, seeing those environments, every COCOM relies on the one right around them, to the left of them, right of them, as well as defense of the homeland. So as you look at DISA as a whole, as that combat support agency, how are you taking those capabilities? How are you looking at the requirements? How do you bring them the services, the COCOMs and the defense agencies' activities together to get capabilities as a whole that you can deliver to the warfighter and work in an environment really in a synergy together to provide those? As yesterday, I loved the conversation talking about, okay, when is Army going to go to Army 365 SEC? And it was a great environment of saying that is a single tenancy. The Army is going to actually adopt a joint tenancy DODJ 365 SEC and REL within it. And so as we look at it, what are those joint capabilities that you're delivering, with always the mind to first integration of coalition as well. So DoD 365 SEC within the secret environment is what we've learned is necessary. How do you bring it together? And what we've learned from the unclassified, the IL5 side. We needed to necessitate go to the Office 365. We ended up with about 14 tenants. And we've all learned the torture, pain, angst of going between them, and I did that about a year ago. So that's where the department said we need a singular tenant. We need all services, COCOMs to look towards that tenant to adopt for the secret environment, because again, that's the warfighting platform that is going to be fought on and utilized. As well as if you look in the unclass environment, the IL5 environment, again, talked about 14 tenants. What is already Army's adopted to a degree, and they're working in piloting as well, is that environment where tenant-to-tenant trust. The ability to port people over and move people more or less seamlessly. Again, there's a little bit of work, but reality completely different than we have it today. How do you move folks from tenant to tenant in an integrated environment and be able to allow them to move. In reality, I go to the warfighter from COCOM to COCOM in the conversation, share data, share information, and be able to do it. So that's one area where you're taking and making sure that data is able to port over, move over, and is not network-centric, is not really an environment where it all depends who you are and where you are. It allows you to move over. The only other thing I'd say is when we look at it, how do we actually, and I think General Skinner touched on it briefly yesterday. He mentioned about the thing of how do you have common IT within COCOMs, within services, or within agencies and defense agencies. That's where the 4E&O program, which is actually the system, is DoDNet. So similar to IL5, IL6, DoDNet is that capability that actually comes with the suite of tools that allows, in this case, the defense agencies' activities to be able to be on a single tenant, single capability, single domain, through the same government service or help desk or government service desk to be able to come together. So as that program actually started out is how do we actually look at all of the fourth estate? But in building that platform, building those capabilities, what actually ended up occurring is you actually created a department-wide, enterprise-level, capable system that the entire department could adopt. And many of the COCOMs, and some of the COCOMs were actually built into the very first bits of it, and will be out rolling on to DoD 365, as well as DoDNet in the 23-24 timeframe. That capability as a whole actually starts opening the opportunity for COCOMs, and General Skinner mentioned it sort of like common IT is how he mentioned it yesterday. That now starts allowing you to communicate more or less 0-day in competition, in crisis planning, and be able to communicate. And then it brings in all the other principles like zero trust architecture and other capabilities all under that umbrella. Currently it's in the green and red category, unclassed and SIPR, but it actually has and is in the talks of really adding the yellow into it as well.
Well, thank you for that. And I get interested in this because one of the ways that the maneuver forces tend to overcome these problems is with manpower. And so, Dr. Markowitz, I want to come back to you. So we have this, take that down one level into the Army, and what are we doing to enable this at both vertically and horizontally across the Army, this data integration, interoperability at scale. And I'm just going to keep working down for the rest of you.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. No, it's a great question because how do you start to get this at scale and at echelon? And interoperability, example I always use is, people often think of interoperability as technical, but data-wise it's often more operational how you want to use it. Great example is like, what is a unit? And is like the logistics system have the same view of unit as the fire system, the same view as the mission command, same view as finance or contracting, right? And if you try to communicate like where is a unit in deployment versus is it able to take a fire's order, those are sometimes different definitions of unit, and the different systems use it differently. So we have to make sure that those definitions are consistent. Hence, kind of view could start off at the theater level. I'm going to go a little bit up before going down. The Army's actively participating with the guide series at the joint level to make sure that we work with the combatant command so that as an Army unit deploys into theater, we're getting that kind of views of processes. Hopefully, as General Popoff has said, we have a common view across all COCOMs as opposed to every COCOM kind of rolling its own. But making sure we've got the ability for Army data to start to feed up, and we understand what is expected, and when the Joint Force kind of comes down and gives us a direction, we know how to understand their data, bring it down. There's a big move right now on the Army to do fix and pivot at making the division kind of the unit of action, the center. That's creating a lot of questions about data interoperability between the division, brigade, and battalion, and then division back up to corps. So learning experience to make sure as we kind of relearn how to fight at the division level, that the data starts to flow both up and down those echelons as we're learning forward. There's a TTX, and then we're hopefully going to get in the dirt sometime in February to understand how that really starts to flow, and to make sure at the data level we can pass that information back and forth. We're trying to enable that to reduce the manpower needs by publishing what we think are simplified in the new parlance of data mesh or whatever, a data product, a simplified data structure that you'd actually would like pay money for it as to buy. It's simplified, it's curated, and we have data governance over to say that's the right thing to use. We're trying to publish that at the enterprise level. Certain pilots we've got undergoing using different types of API techniques to move that forward. To be honest, not as mature as I'd like. The data tagging to make sure people can get access is very immature. It's an area that we really need to work on. That's of our areas of like our largest weakness in moving forward. Data tagging at the broad Army level is one of our weaker points to enable that kind of easy use up and down echelon. But it's really these focusing on these activities to kind of help drive the change. I mean, we're a really big Army. Some areas are moving much faster than others. Using these activities will help both build our people, build leaders, build our understanding for how to do these processes. So we're trying to build on a series of success. Again, theater level is part of the Army data plan. The fix and pivot is really going at division, and to make sure we've got those echelons right through a data structure. Okay, one last piece I could put is to publish it in our enterprise data service catalog, to have a central repository so it's easy to see, easy to kind of research and find. It's got a good amount of information on our business side, and we're trying to build that warfighting aspect to facilitate these two efforts.
Yeah, that data tagging is an industry, you just hope they heard that here. So I'd like to shift gears here a little bit. We're very fortunate to have Major General Ray, the director of the network cross-functional team. I'm pretty biased toward this team when we created those 8, because this is actually the team that impacts all the other CFTs in what they do and what they don't do. So General Ray, what are some specific examples of progress that you've made in the data-centric area for capabilities of the force?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here. I think I'll start out with kind of what I talked about yesterday to some of the other folks that my initial intro yesterday was, if you are not excited that the fact that everyone that has been on this podium is aligned, and if anything that you want to take away from this conference is alignment of our vision, of our processes, the alignment of our people, what we're trying to do with our people, and we're aligning our funding to support everything that we're talking about. If you're not excited about that, this is the first time, like I told them yesterday, in almost 4 decades that I've seen the Army aligned behind the network and communications and cyber that I've ever seen since I've been in the Army. And you have to be excited on that. And with that, 24 months, 26 months ago, we embarked on data centricity, and here we are talking about what it is and potentially getting ready to deliver some things on that. And the Secretary told us to move to a data-centric environment, and the momentum is there, and it's not going to stop right now, and I am excited about it, and I hope everyone in the room is excited about it. I'll tell you, the things that are the backbone of the data-centric environment is transport. And you heard about transport agnostic has been discussed. We're delivering on that with auto pace and with bandwidth virtualization in 24. C5ISR has already transitioned that so that we can deliver on it. We talked about having a catcher's mitt that we need in order to catch our sensors, which is our data fabric, and that is also transitioned and moving. And a PEO C3T, along with the CCOE and others, we're moving forward with that, and that's going to be delivered as well. And then the last piece is that we have to have a new modern security architecture, and you've heard the discussion going with zero trust and ICANN. All that is part of what is going to get us to propel to the data-centric environment. And we need it as we transition to large-scale combat operations. As you heard Dr. Markowitz state, commanders are looking for how we're aligning people, how we're going to provide them visualization on the battle space, And that's exactly what we're delivering across the board.
Thank you. With that, I want to move to one of the premier organizations of our Army, which a lot of people don't know about outside of this room, but which is CECOM. And we're very fortunate to have Major General Edmondson with us today. And the sustainment of hardware and software, considering the growth of both across the Army in every way, what are some of the ways that we're working the sustainment and their impact on this Army data-centric future?
Well, sir, thank you for the question, and thanks to everyone for joining us here this morning. You mentioned in the very beginning an organization that not many may know about. I'm sure some in this room have heard about, but quite frankly, until you've been assigned there, you really don't know what happens inside that organization. And so what I'm going to share with you are many of the lessons learned, or a few of the lessons learned that I've picked up in the last 2 years in command of Communications Electronics Command, specifically with regard to hardware and software, that absolutely, as General Ray had pointed out, transport in that case will enable data centricity. Data centricity allows commanders to make decisions. Decisions are about people. And so when we look at CECOM and we look at the entire portfolio, which is C5ISR readiness across the entire total force, the entire total fighting force, Compo 1, Compo 2, Compo 3, we are involved in 3 of the 4 elements of the USR, for everyone that understands Army readiness: training, pieces and parts, that's the sustainment piece, and then the readiness, the equipment readiness. And we bundle all of that together to deliver the capability to the Army so that as all of the technologies that we're talking about here, all that are going to be purchased, borrowed, rented, and issued to our soldiers, more importantly, actually deliver a capability for the commanders. And so I've got a statistic here that I'd like to share with you, just one, so I'm not going to ask anyone to take a lot of notes, and hopefully you don't glaze over. But in terms of providing context to the CECOM mission in support of data centricity, I asked the team, I said, as of yesterday, how many pieces of C5ISR, how many issues have we fixed this fiscal year? And the answer that came back was just over 21,000. Now that's 21,000 that are all part of this network that we're talking about. 21,000 repairs. I said, okay, well, let's break that down between hardware and software. And I was a little surprised. Just about a 50-50 split. Software edged out hardware by 1 point, okay, we'll say 2, 51 to 49. But then I asked the team to take it a step further. I said, look deeper at the hardware and the issues, the complexity, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. As I asked the team, take a look at the issues that are above the soldier level for hardware. And of the roughly 10,000 or so hardware issues that we had out there that needed repair, only 10% required above soldier, direct hands-on. Software painted a much different picture. Again, of the 21,000, 10,000 plus were software related, and of the 10,000, 79% of those challenges, issues, opportunities are above the level of the soldier today. And so when we look at the journey that we're on today in terms of delivering capability for our warfighters across Compos 1, 2, and 3, the CECOM as well as AMC is strategically positioned around the globe to tackle that 79% that I'm talking about. And that's a little known fact that is out there, something that we're digging into. And quite frankly, the cyber readiness initiatives have allowed us to dig deeper to be able to see ourselves and see all the formations across the Army. I'm really excited about our visualization, and I can talk more about that a little bit later. But perhaps, my last point to make on this particular question is that what we have done, and fortunately we started this just over a year ago, and we didn't know 79% at that time, but what we started just over a year ago was we operationalized software inside SEC. We took the Software Engineering Center and made them an end-to-end owner of software. So gone are the days of developing software in the lab lab and above work, high-end work, and then issuing that to the field. I think my gut's telling me that we may have contributed a little bit to some of the 79% that I'm describing right now. And now I've placed SEC in charge of end-to-end. You develop it, you issue it, you write the TMs, you take the responsibility end-to-end so that you can see what in the lab you're developing, how well it is being implemented and executed at the tactical level. So I'm incredibly excited about this opportunity to operationalize the work that has been just kind of behind the scenes for a number of years, but it's absolutely essential.
I think these are some stunning statistics, especially when you think that in general, you see hardware being replaced by software. And when you think about it in that aspect, as we look forward, that has some pretty serious implications for how CCOM has to operate in the future. So thanks for your leadership and thanks for your comments on that.
Sir, if I could make one follow-up to the point that you just made about software. When the United States Army deployed 5th Corps and 3ID last year into the European AOR, I received one phone call for assistance. And that one phone call had to do with high-end software engineers going into the AOR to perform tasks immediately for our soldiers. Fortunately, we have great Americans, Department of the Army civilians that jumped right on planes and flew over there without hesitation.
You actually, describe a great point. Like with that shift, what is the organizational construct going forward for that, and do we need to build for that? But I now want to turn to another great leader in our Army, Colonel Van den Bosch, who's the 7th Signal Commander, Deputy Commander for NetCom. Many of you know what they do, global presence. Of course, I have a place in my heart for 7th Sig, given the CONUS mission that they have. But Colonel Van den Bosch, what is NetCom's role in moving to this network-centric environment?
Thank you, sir. It's a great opportunity to be here today and be part of this discussion. I think it's important to the synchronization across these organizations as we look at how we take care of our forces today, the readiness for the future, and how do we sustain that capability. And NetCom from a global standpoint, if you think of just at a very basic level, the backbone that you tie your data into and that units at home station are building their readiness, they're connecting into it, and when they deploy, they're connecting in to demonstrate that readiness. So it's important. General Eubank will say that we are a global organization in contact with the adversary every single day. And we're delivering your data to you to make decisions and take action. We kind of all bring it together, but it's a team of teams. And one of the things that General Eubank did was establish the Global Cyber Center so we can synchronize better across regions and across theaters. And then Mr. Dedemark, our civilian deputy to the CG, he leads our continuous improvement board, where we look at activities that drive really implementation of the Army Unified Network Plan. How do we turn that into reality? And a little bit what Mr. Garcia kind of mentioned yesterday, the discipline of these activities going forward. And we're really focused on 8 really enabling capabilities. You start from the top, some that you've seen already in 2022, 23, and it'll be developed more in 24, 25 as Army 365, and then partnership with DISA on 365 SEC rolling out this year. You look down at the Unified Directory Services, so I can now, General Morrison mentioned the other day, is I can take my device and I can go from installation to installation, from region to region, from theater to theater, and plug in and log in. Again, it seems like, why couldn't we do that before, right? But we're making it, there's reasons why we were established in stovepipes in the past, and now we have opportunities to break down those barriers. And then you look at opportunities for virtual desktop, from a security standpoint and a user experience standpoint. Once you establish your desktop, if you have it in your office or you go on travel or you're at the home, this is great capabilities that we're able to provide with really the team of teams. And then endpoint security. And then voice monitorization moving forward, from not just a hard phone replacement, but moving forward from a soft phone, and then from a regional versus just a installation standpoint. So we're excited from all the things that are moving forward, sir.
I think a number of those initiatives are also going to give us huge time savings, and which leads to speed of decisions. So I'm quite excited. I remember even as a 2ID commander, it was different networks between Area 1 and Area 2, which makes, even that's, when you think about it, I'm glad these problems are getting solved. If I could go back to you, General Popovich, and talk about cloud. So obviously, we're all tracking the work at DoD level, all the big cloud providers, forget the name of the big program, but lots of money being dumped into cloud. What are some of the initiatives that DISA is working with transport related to the use of enterprise cloud computing and storage, especially in a challenged EMS environment and in a intermittent comms environment?
Yeah. So if you look at it, and I would say it's really the partnerships with all of the services and the co-coms. And when you put it together, I guess I'm now really excited when Jess says that. But you've never seen really that partnership all the way from the joint down to the services, down into the co-coms, and really the sharing of information. And as you look at it, DISA is 19,500 people, really global presence. But it's, again, back to the third largest network is the DISN, or the Defense Information Systems Network. So you look at that network, and how do you actually take the data, have the data where it needs to reside, from all the way back in the enterprise, all the way to the tactical edge, what needs to be there at what point in time. So that's actually a lot of the conversations I have when I'm talking to COCOM J3s. And I think General Morrison mentioned it yesterday. This is probably the first time you're now getting the operational folks and the actual operators into the conversation on what is the relevant data you need to draw in information to actual actionable information that the commander needs or at echelon you need. An example is at the very tactical edge, do you need a pipe of, make up a number, 6 gigabytes of blah, blah, blah that's shoved through a pipe constantly? Do you have systems that allow that information to go? Because again, we're all talking about denied, degraded environments. So as you look at that, what is the information that the actual decision maker needs, not the data specific, but the data that needs to get to the end user in order to make that information to make actionable, relevant information? So an example I use is some of the exercises in a couple of theaters and lived through it in Europe and worked through it in the Pacific and other areas is, do you need to see everything on a COP at a platoon level, a command level, a brigade level? Or what do you actually need to see? What is the refresh rate? What does it need to look like? And that's where actually commanders are getting in the room, and I think General Ray mentioned it a couple days ago, of you're now bringing operators in the room, those operational commanders with the technicians to work through that problem set. Because again, we're always going to be in an environment where there's not enough bandwidth. We're always trying to add things. We always never get rid of anything in the conversation of utilization of bandwidth. So how do you bring it together of what information and what data you need to push all the way from enterprise level to the tactical edge? That's all sort of leading into the conversation of when you look at the transport network, how do you have the subsea, the terrestrial, and the space really transport capabilities? And that's where DISA is really that key enabler that, just like CCOM, probably everyone doesn't know everything that DISA does, but everyone knows they're there for that global transport. And so that's all sort of leading, again, to step back a little from that of, how do you do that within a zero trust architecture? How do you do that within an environment that enables a cyber resilient force that allows that data to move to tactical edge seamlessly back and forward, and really make sure you have those in a really transport agnostic environment to be able to get to the warfighter? That's where DISA is really key in working those of How do you create that resiliency? How do you, as I think I've heard through some of the others, be able to mix your traffic in? If anyone's looked within the to the east and Europe, the more you actually emit, the more visible you are. And so how do you actually mix your traffic in? How do you use commercial? How do you use military? How do you move back and forth between them? Those are key things that this is looking at when you look at the transport. The other is, again, what is the host and compute environments? So everyone's talking cloud, I got it. Not everything goes into the cloud as well. So it's really an analysis from the operational commander, what is the perspective you need, what is the information you need, where you need to reside, and how do you bring it forward? That's where the Joint Warfighter Cloud Capability, or JWCC, is that capability for the joint environment. Unlike a couple other fits and starts, this is one of those that brings 4 vendors together and actually partners them together, not in competition, but it partners them together to deliver what the warfighter needs, and it provides opportunity for really the customers or the warfighters to design what they need, decide where it needs to reside, and then as well as when you look at, there's still a need for on-prem. As mentioned, when you start going OCONUS, there's many data sovereignty issues, and you have to bring them together. That then creates the environment you have to have on-prem in order to be able to meet those requirements. So that's where we look at on-prem traditional data centers. We look at off-prem traditional capabilities. We look at those cloud capabilities in both of those environments. And that's where we're even piloting within the Pacific AOR of putting commercial cloud within US data centers in order to deliver cloud effects in those environments. That all has to be done within a DevSecOps type of environment, and Vulcan is one of those at the joint level. But you can see now the conversations within cloud of the ECMA, within the Air Force's systems and with the Navy systems, all talking together of how do we bring them together, not in competition, but partnership, really to figure out how do you move between services, how do you share that data, how do you share that information, and that's all based upon, I would say same thing. I've never seen really the communication all the way from the joint, from the Honorable Sherman all the way down, and the emphasis of really the operational warfighter looking to understand and determine how do they solve this problem.
So building on that, in the previous previous session, General Barrett highlighted a data chart that was quite interesting, and I first off am quite excited about that, Jeff, and I'm thinking, wow, if we lay down the transport on top of that, and then we start thinking about, okay, you given your relationship with your co-lead there from the acquisition community, how could industry help, with the increasing use of software capabilities like software-defined radios, applications, intermittent transport capabilities, storage and compute, this is an overused word, and Dr. Markowitz and I had a conversation on this last night, but in a autonomy, machine learning, artificial intelligence environment. I hope I'm being clear there. So you saw that big data chart, there's gonna be a transport, and you have all kinds of capabilities that are coming on. We're gonna need a lot of help from industry on this. Where can they help in this area?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And as we look at large-scale combat operations, there's some changes fundamentally we have to make across the Army as a whole, especially within our command posts. And that's where we're going to need a lot of help from industry, because we're going to have to be more agile and on the move. We're going to have to set up hasty command posts and able to continue comms while we're moving. It's been 13 plus years, I know, that I have been working on just on the move, and we just haven't gotten there yet. And that's where I really believe we're going to need the help from industries, helping us truly get the, those antenna systems that are not going to be blocked by a stop sign, for instance. It's not going to be blocked by a building, but it can leverage other capabilities within its portfolio, its platform, in order to provide us the transport that we need to get to the data for the commander to make informed decisions while they're on the move. But at the same time, it's going to have to ensure that we're hiding in plain sight on the move, blending in with commercial systems that are out there. We're going to need that obfuscation that's out there. General George and the Undersecretary, wrote an op-ed that talked about what they really think about a simple, intuitive, signature, lowering our signature kind of network that we need to move to. We have to get there for our users to move. So that's where we need the help. We're moving complexity from the BCT up. We've been BCT centric for the last 21, 22 years. We're working to move that complexity up. So we want more intuitive capabilities at that lower level so they can engage in the fight. And so that's where we're going to need industry's help. But we need to protect those soldiers at that edge with their signature management across the board. And I think, for the first time, I walked the floor, and I got to commend industry. When I talked to myself and Mr. Kitts, we talked to certain industry partners, they were not talking about their specific capability. They were telling us about 6, 7, sometimes even 20 other partners that are part of the solution. That's something we've never seen, how industries coming together. Again, alignment of where we're trying to go. I commend industry for building that partnership with other organizations along the way to help us achieve the goal that we're looking for. But those are some small things that we're going to need help from industry for when it comes to this data-centric environment we're moving to.
So General Edmondson, based on those two comments, how do you see CCOM's role evolving in this?
So I mentioned the word, and others have mentioned the word complexity a number of times. I think to begin to look at CCOM's role going forward, we're digging deeper into that word complexity. And so we're digging deeper into, just as an example, the 21,000 fixes that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier. And we believe that not all of those issues are complex, but that some, instead of complexity, we may be looking at a new reality as well. So there's a delicate balance between the two. And so while we're moving forward to elevate complexity, I think we also need to, inside CCOM, realize that there is a reality on the ground today, and I think we're going to have a reality on the ground at an echelon for a period of time. And that reality is driving us to work quite closely with not only industry on supply chain vulnerabilities that are out there, and I don't mean just parts that are showing up late. I literally mean sometimes the raw materials that exist in some other countries. We have to work through that piece. But also we're partnered very closely with our PMs at Aberdeen Proving Ground on what that future kit, we're providing recommendations on that future kit. We're working very closely with the CCOE. Sir, you mentioned a little bit earlier, perhaps we need to take a look at a band of individuals and how are we training them? How are we hiring them? What are those expectations? I think that's part of the new reality as well. And so what are we doing inside CCOM? Some of what I had just mentioned. I also would like to offer that, coming back to supply chain for just a moment, we can't be reactive in supply chain. We cannot put ourselves as a nation in the position where we are solely reliant on outside. We inside CCOM, in fact, Toby Hanna in particular, I've charged them to take a closer look at their ability to fabricate circuit cards. I mean, there is work that we need to do inside CCOM, inside the United States, for us to not place ourselves at risk when we are operating in a crisis or a conflict. We're in competition today, and we're literally competing for some of the same pieces of IT components here in this room and across our militaries, all the different services. And when you think about conflict in the future, some of those foreign militaries that we might compete with in a kinetic environment are the same militaries that we will compete with for IT parts going forward. And we've all seen the horrors of war over in Ukraine today. We also saw what happened to the Russian army as they halted outside of Kyiv. It was their supply chain that brought them to a halt. And so inside CCOM, we are determined that C5ISR will not be a reason that the United States Army ever culminates early.
Sir, can I add something? And Dr. Marcus, you can probably get on top of what I'm saying here. But supply chain, we look at it a little differently as well. So as we acquire capability, what we're asking industry to ensure is that you may have subs that are out there doing some, making a circuit board for you. We really need to ensure that there's quality control behind those circuit boards that are being built out there and where they're being built and by whom. We really need that help across the board. Or any capability that you're bringing, whether it's from the tactical to the enterprise side, as we unify this network, we need to ensure that QC and quality control. Do you agree with Dr. Markowitz?
Oh, absolutely. I think General Barrett mentioned it this morning, even on the software side, is what Mr. Young brought up, to understand where the software pedigree is, so that as we get components, we've got trusted sources as we go through, and have that relationship. If there is an issue along the supply chain, we can defend not only what we have, but to understand where defense goes in depth across the supply chain. It's also becoming incredibly competitive at as we are ramping up our own industrial base to support war efforts in Europe. Our allies are asking us our same industrial base. So understanding where those choke points are throughout both the United States and our international partners is kind of critical, so that we understand dependencies. And as I said, Honorable Bush has been kind of a major proponent of making sure the defense industrial base can surge to meet the nation's need in pure combat, because it will stress every part of our nation to be able to support, so we do not culminate early.
Yeah, just to tag on that for industry, I would argue that you're going to see a lot more interest from the department on both software and hardware supply lines. So for example, large memory manufacturer uses 61 rare earth minerals. Now or 61 elements of the periodic table. Okay, so how good are we? That's the question. It's not that we don't want it, it's like, do we need to buy more? Do we need a stockpile? Is this a war reserve problem? So I just lay that out there because I see this a growing area in my conversations with the Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, industrial policy, et cetera. So I lay that out there. General Ben Den Bosch, your turn on this. So,
Colonel, sir, yes, sir.
oh, I promoted you, sorry.
Appreciate it.
I hope you get promoted quickly.
Here you can have
How are you, so in particular on these new technologies, maybe you could talk a little bit about mobile, right? And because that's obviously rapidly emerging. I mean, look what's going on in the commercial world. We're getting there, but we're not really leveraging that, I believe, to the degree that we could. Maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
I appreciate that, sir. So I'll touch on three, even though we probably could expand upon that a little bit more. But I mentioned AVD earlier, so kind of give the example, from a virtual desktop standpoint. Based off of that A365 tenant, we leverage this additional capability. And here's an example. I was at the office on Friday afternoon, had a bunch of work, had a couple of documents I needed to digitally sign, a couple of emails open, and then household 6 calls, time to come home, all in AVD. So closed that up, went home, took care of whatever I needed to take care of. The next morning I was able to get up, all my emails, everything was still there. So my workflow from what I left the office, went home, didn't change. So I closed up a few things, then I got on the plane to come out here on Sunday, and then finished up the rest of it. Had a clean slate on Sunday. That's always a good way to start Monday morning, right? So, but able to have that same regardless of government-owned or personal device, and that's, to me, that's hugely impactful for our remote workforce program, but also the realm of the possible for beyond just what we think of as traditional remote or telework type possibilities. And then you can overlay that with bring your own device. So I have it on my phone here today, and when I took command on the 30th of June, I said, I'm not giving my government cell phone number to anybody, and I'm not giving my desk phone number to everybody. So what do I have? I have the Army 365 phone number, calls on, off post, and so that's the number that I give. So nobody knows, I don't even know it, frankly, my cell phone. It's in my bag in case I need a backup, but I don't even know what either one of those phone numbers are. So overlay that, somebody calls me on my personal device with my work number or my personal number coming to one device. But all that's, I think interesting, but the one that kind of excites me the most is CSFC, Global SIPR Network. So I think I saw earlier, retired General Chase was out there, and I remember using CSFC back in 2014, 15 timeframe, and the number of people we were allowed to have was small. And then there's a couple other iterations, and 7th and Netcom has developed 2 separate nodes that we have providing global capability in the thousands to thousands of users, thousands of devices today. But that is really, we're learning lessons from that, and that Colonel Jay Shell and the PM are moving forward with global SIPRNet network. So taking that, implementing at one node, we're going to have nodes across the globe. And the power of that is from 2 aspects. If you're on an installation, you can reduce the amount of cost that you have on that new construction, on that reconstruction with PDS, with SIPR infrastructure that we need to build into that, and it reduces your time and your people having to manage those PDS or other. And then you look from the opportunities from a tactical perspective. How can we no longer, reduce the amount of type 1 type encryption that we need to bring for the bat, or increase the flexibility of your packages moving forward, across, from competition to crisis to conflict, depending on where you are in that fight. So that's the one I'm frankly, all those are interesting for a little bit from individuals in your workforce, and that's great, but I think we have something really going on with the CSFC moving forward.
Thank you. Dr. Markowitz, I can't leave without asking this question, and that has all about the data governance practices. But I'm going to ask it in a specific way, which is, because this is not settled at all, which is the governance over the use of large language models, over how we're going to deal with machine learning models, how we're going to deal with algorithms, how can we trust them. Maybe if you could talk a little bit to that, now that we're getting our data in a position that we can actually do this at speed and scale, how are we going to control, I would use maybe the words command and control it. That might not be the right words, but I'm trying to figure out what these, you get, I think you understand where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, thank you. So yeah, so there's certainly been a lot in the press on large language models. I think it's kind of galvanized our interest of how to use these tools. So if I could answer it kind of more specifically on these generative AI and then more broadly on tools. So generative AI, certainly senior defense leadership, Dr. Martell has a lot of congressional inquiries. There's OMB's interested in how all the federal agencies are starting to have an AI officer or someone who controls. And there seems to be kind of like 2 views in the world. One is these tools will solve world hunger or global warming or you name your crisis, or they're Skynet and they're about to end the world. So truth is probably someplace in the middle, kind of safely you can say that. But it's really, we don't know. It's for large language models, the phrase is it's probably escaped the lab a little too quick. But it's here and we've got to kind of deal with it. At the Department of Defense level, there's a project, Project Lima, that's going to look at 30+ use cases of large language models and really identify kind of where they fit. Because it's some areas are probably going to fit well, some areas not. The general view is they're helpful if you can put it in a situation where you can control the outcome or have user views. So there's broad 3 views where we do these 30+ cases. One is the output's easy enough to understand. The human can look at it and say, like a rough draft, I've got it, I use it, I've checked it, I've verified it. it's helped me do my job, but I'm responsible at the end of the day. Check. There is the, I don't mind if this algorithm hallucinates a lot. The risk is okay. You know, it made up some stuff, but it's okay for my purposes. I'm not exactly sure where those use cases live in Department of Defense, but that's okay. If you're willing to accept the risk that the model just kind of makes up stuff, good for you. Check, but you're going to own that check. And the other is it doesn't work, and it needs to go kind of back. So these use cases are important to kind of to look through. I personally believe that one of the best use cases is software development. You have controlled environments, you've got compilers, you've got hopefully a DevSecOps environment if we kind of get that fully going up. They'll provide some left and right limits. From a data side, you'll have data definitions, what those large language models can use. So code is an area to like rapidly produce code, I think is a good one with left and right limits that fits that first category where you can get a check and some real value added to the Army. So I'm real excited about that one. Now broadly about governance and use. There is from old ORSA days, from VVNA your model, and there's got to be a lot of ownership of if you're going to use it, you've got to verify that it's doing what you need operationally. I also think that there's a need to kind of have a ramp up of things that are kind of simple and trusted, like a linear regression model as a very simple, takes data in, fixes some parameters, and everyone kind of understands how to use it, to your more complicated, if it's natural language processing, which is actually pretty well established and pretty well used, to your higher end, like logical, large language models. So there's a lot of two kind of requests from industry in this area. One is to allow users to have kind of an on-ramp of easy to use versus more complicated. So saw a lot of great success, at least on the data side, if you've, like Microsoft Excel, Power BI, they have a lot of easy to use entrance level activity. And then if you are really skilled, you can grow within that platform to give more complicated areas for, like on the data side, if it's SQL, Python, if you're writing your own AI algorithm portion, you want that kind of customization within that same tool set. So that growth pattern, I think, is helpful to providing tools at scale within the Army. The other request from industry is to allow for, as kind of General Ray just kind of said, interoperability across industry. So if it's nice to have kind of an easy use feel for a user to kind of do some of these tool sets, but to be able to use other industry aspects. From data, make sure you've got data pipelines from wherever you want so you can get what data you need to feed an AI algorithm. If there's different AI algorithms or libraries that are trusted to General Barrett's view, if I can understand where it came from, being able to pipe them in so that you have the ability to leverage other industry solutions there. That's so easy kind of scale of user experience and interoperability. Two real industry requests. Seen this on the data side. If you get that done, we start to innovate and move at scale. We're tracking analytic tools within our data platforms, and we've been linearly increasing the amount of new analytic products per week. And it's really transforming the Army at scale. So the rough kind of figure is about anyone who kind of uses these tools for kind of simple decision aids. For every one of those, for every 10 of those, there's one person in your organization developing it and doing it. So we want them to be able to have enough trust in the algorithm itself, if it's on that early side, or train them to get to that high end that they can innovate within their organization to start to transition at scale. We provide some level of central training, Analyst 101. I think we need to get to the algorithm side. Certainly the ORSA community provides a lot of that backbone. Trying to get that knowledge out there across all of our MOSs, and CAC has taken a great lead on data literacy. And the question is, will we start to get to algorithm literacy as that kind of follow-on? That's maybe not your 101 course, but your 102 course. And then start to build that bench so that every functional area can kind of use these types of flexible tools and start to change the Army at scale.
Okay. I think, Paul, we have time for a few questions. Are there some questions?
Yes, sir. There are a lot of questions about the mission partner environment, so we'll start with one there. And it is a mostly Army panel, but it's a joint question. As the DoD at large transitions to a cloud-enabled C3 platform, what is planned or already happening in terms of security authentication framework or access authorization to ensure that the services equities have parity in the mission partner environment arena, and who's driving those requirements?
Maybe before, I'll let somebody jump on this, right? But it's the importance of understanding your data, right? And this is, you all know this, we always talk about these access controls, right? But who has access to what data? But the data has to be, as we generate data, we have to determine who should have access to it. And in the mission partner environment, you can just imagine how hard this is, and then we want to build these bridges. So whoever wants to jump on that is a hard problem.
So I'll jump on it first, because I kind of worked this problem set in CENTCOM probably about 2.5 years, well, 2.5 years ago now. So I think the first thing we have to do is separate where we are and where we're trying to go. So we've been trying to go to the mission partner environment for quite a while. So the mission partner network, episodic, we've been bringing it up, bringing it down. One of the priorities for the network cross-functional team is move to the mission partner environment so that it's persistent. In order to get to the persistency of the network where you can plug in, plug out of the network, I think is going to require a couple things. And what I used to say when I was in CENTCOM to the team was, let us go to our partners first and say, what data are you willing to share? And if we could get them to answer that question, then it will help us know where do we go next. Because once we get the identity in ICAM fixed where we can at least have an identity, in that environment, when we build that zero trust environment, we'll begin to utilize attribute-based access control. If we tag and label our data like Dr. Markowitz says, all those things have to happen in order for us to really get into that persistent mission partner environment. Or we're going to continue to stay in the mission partner network that will require a cross-domain to help in sharing the data across the board. So that's kind of an opening. I don't know who wants to jump on it. I may not have it all right, but I know we tackled it for about 2.5 years, and we're trying to get there.
So as we talk about it, again, moving from a network-centric to data-centric, when you talk about a mission partner environment, a lot of people are talking about a network. What we really should be changing the conversation is, what are those attributes? What's that identity management, credential management that needs to be there? Immaterial right now, it's again, there will be many probably mission partner environments, and you see them sporadically, around the globe, and it's usually based upon bilateral understandings and agreements. And it really gets down to who defines those standards. How do you get to really a federated mission network standards that as a whole countries agree upon? Which then gets back to how do you have a global federated user directory or GFUD or identity management system within it? How do you define similar to joint versus Army identity, ICAM or identity management? Same thing with nations. What is it? What are the attributes you need? What is it, the information you need to see? And it comes back to what I would say for really industry, and as I travel globally and talk to other countries, joint now, but Army, really chief staffs of the armies of other countries, and then there's sixes. What is it you are trying to achieve in this environment? How do you get to a persistent capability? Because episodic will mean we will never get there. How do you actually utilize it within operations? What is the data? How do you actually identify it, tag it, and deliver it? We've talked about a lot of technology here. We've talked about data as a whole, but if you don't have that credentialing management or ICAM or identity management as a whole, that's one fundamental. The other is data and data tagging. And this is where I'd say to industry is, I think Mr. Denham mentioned Army 365 has 18 petabytes, or don't quote me on that, but something like that of data. Huh? Okay. And the point is, with all of that data, what are you doing with it? How do you actually tag that data within an environment that is doing it within sort of automated process procedures, utilizing even AI, machine language or AI capabilities to take the human out of the loop of simple tasks of tagging it, categorizing it. But it also comes back to what Dr. Markowitz just mentioned of, when we talk about generative AI or any of these other capabilities, it's really back to the human in the loop to validate that that information is being categorized correctly. So that's the second point, is how do you actually help the government and help foreign nationals and partners to look at their data? How do you actually look at how to quickly tag the data? How do you actually categorize it into grouping of information? And then really the next is for then the governments, the militaries, to actually turn it into usable, actionable information at the operational level.
It seems to me, Jeff, if you take that data chart that General Barrett showed, and we laid that across mission functions, and so, because when you ask partners for like, what data do you need, they need a frame by which we're asking the question.
Exactly.
And so if we lay down our, okay, this is our battlefield functional areas, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Correct.
Right? And then you lay that on top and they circle which ones, all of a sudden, think about how much time we save when we don't have time really to do this. Might be something to think about as we go forward. Next question, please.
So we have a lot of questions waiting. We only have time for one more.
Okay.
To fully realize CSFC across the network, is the Army driving industry to deliver CSFC integrated and capable phones, teleconference, and print scan capabilities?
Netcom, you're on.
Yeah. So I'll start off, and I'll be frank. I don't know the answer to that question right now. I don't know if somebody on my team can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I don't know the answer to that right now. But obviously that makes sense to incorporate across the board from like to think of the soft phone, hard phone, voice modernization, and ACE 365 opportunities are there. Extend that to the unclassed side, especially when we're coupled with DoD 365 sec. And even when we talk about CSFC, it's more than just that the encryption transport. When you overlay that with VDI, you overlay that with multiple independent layers of security, it creates more opportunities. And then in the tenant or in the capability now, when you go in between different security levels, you have to select which devices you're using. I think the answer is yes, but I personally don't run it right now. But
Dr. Barker was probably
Sir?
add a
Yeah,
couple
so
things.
I'm going to add in just a slightly different take, is that a key component of CSFC is central delivery of the service. So it is to reduce the amount of interoperability challenges by having central delivery. This is like the big idea behind the unified network, is that we have central delivery of key services, so we don't have 14 different ones across the Army that we have to paste together afterwards. It's one delivery. We have short interoperability because it's centrally delivered. It's cross-compo. It's cross-theater. So the idea is yes, but the way we want to focus on that is to have one person providing, and that is NetCom.
Yes.
So
Well, with
thank you,
that-
gentlemen. We have time for one more question.
Oh, good. Okay, we were quick on that one.
With the recent announcement of software moving to a CI/CD model, can you explain the impact, obviously, for General Edmondson, that will have on CCOM support?
Yeah, no, great question. I am incredibly excited about the furtherance of CI/CD. Quite frankly, SEC has been operating in the CI/CD DevSecOps model for a number of years now. And it's only going to get faster. We're only going to have the capability to deliver a better product, a better solution for our formations as we all adopt CI/CD. Now, that said, it is incredibly important for us on the software side not to outpace the rest of .mil/PF, which is part of the reason that I assigned end-to-end to the Software Engineering Center. While this is an incredible opportunity and we already have been going faster, we'll continue to go even faster. There's no doubt about our ability to do that. We want to make sure that we don't outpace hardware along the way, so we've got to be fully integrated with our hardware division, and we are between hardware and software end to end today. We have to be incredibly integrated with not only the Cyber Center of Excellence from a soldier perspective, but also our Department of the Army civilians and their level of expertise to consume that software that's going to come at them at a much higher rate. But perhaps, most importantly, is under this CI/CD model, we will be able to take the cyber readiness framework, cyber reporting, cyber security to new heights. Because we'll have much greater flexibility, we'll have much greater visibility, quite frankly, and we'll be able to respond to need in a much different fashion. And so I'm incredibly excited about it. We have some work that we still need to do between CCOM and our fellow PEOs on Aberdeen Proving Ground to ensure that everything that we're thinking about right now and the heart of the question is transparent to the commanders on the ground. The commanders are not here in this room right now. They frankly are not listening to this session, but they're the ones that are going to go to war when the nation calls. So we have to ensure that all of these great ideas that we have, and they're wonderful, but they've got to be synchronized and they've got to be transparent to the commanders, that total force that I referenced a little bit earlier, and it's imperative that we get this right.
Okay. So is that the last question this time? Okay. How about a big hand for the panel here? I thought I did a super job. Thank you very much. Okay, and I think that closes us up here. Okay, we're staying right here. I heard that.
Indeed. Please welcome Paul Friedenberg back to the stage.
Yeah, pump it up. General Cardone, entire panel, thank you for being out here today. So Jeff, I am not only excited about the alignment, but I am excited. I'm fired up about the synergy that I see evolving to actually push faster at these problem sets. That's what I'm really fired up about. So thank you very much for all of your comments today. In lieu of a speaker gift, we're going to provide a donation on your behalf to the Fort Gordon Historical Museum Society later on this week. If you just bear with me for a second. So you saw the team up here talking about these national security challenges that we have. And AFCEA's mission is to connect people, ideas, and solutions to enhance that global security. And we leverage what I think is the hidden strength of our nation. And it's that across our government, military, it's across our industry, and it's across our academia. And that is the secret sauce of our society that are going to help answer all these challenges. We're not going to get anywhere. Any one of those teammates are not going to get there individually, but together, the power brings it together. And so I encourage you to join the AFCEA team and be part of that and do your part. And you can join by visiting our booth downstairs, 123, or you can just jump on the app and sign up and get involved and make a difference. We're going to break for lunch now, so please note this is the final chance to get with our exhibitors down in the exhibit hall. And I will tell you that we'll be back here at 12:30 for the mandatory final keynote from General Rainey, the commanding general for Army Futures Command. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you back here at 12:30.